En dit is Vrydagoggend in die pragtige Klein Karoo. Ek hoop dit gaan goed met elkeen van ons luisteraars. Dis Vroue Wat Voorloop saam met my Suezette Smit. En Vroue Wat Voorloop word moontlik gemaak deur Maddie's Bridal Nest en jy vind hulle in Een Vredestraat, Volmoed, Oudtshoorn. As jy op soek is na daardie droomtrou of aantrok teen bekostigbare pryse, skakel vandag nog vir Madeleine by 072 661 4182. Maddie's Bridal Nest, Oudtshoorn. My gas vandag is soos met elke program 'n vrou wat definitief voorloop, sommer hier in die Klein Karoo. Sy is hier by ons in die ateljee, maar is ook 'n vrou wat baie naby aan moeder aarde lewe. En om haar vanoggend in die ateljee te kon kry, midde haar besige skedule op die plaas, is 'n absolute wonderwerk. So Kath, good morning and welcome, and how are you doing?
Thank you so much, Suezette and Dani, for the opportunity to speak on your program. Feels great to be here.
Fantastic. And I just want to say, if I look at you, I went to your farm the other day, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Although Maddie's Bridal Nest has got the most beautiful evening dresses, you are a woman that would look absolutely gorgeous in one of those dresses and high heels. But to our listeners, Kath is somebody that you will see with her jeans and her boots and a khaki shirt. And you told me, it's so cold this morning, so fresh, and you told me this morning that you actually took a cold swim.
Yes, absolutely.
Not a hot shower.
Not a hot shower. I absolutely love, it's called cold water therapy. I follow a man called Wim Hof, and what it does to jump in cold water is it stimulates your brown blood cells or your brown fat cells in your body, and it releases dopamine, which is your feel-good hormone. So it sets me off for the day. I love doing it. I'm a little bit addicted to it, actually.
Fantastic. So to all our listeners, vir al ons luisteraars daar buite, ek dink môreoggend moet ons almal 'n lekker ijskoue shower vat.
Yeah.
So for all our listeners, Kathryn and her partner Ross are the owners of Nimby Valley Guest Farm. Now, Nimby Valley Guest Farm is situated here outside of 35 kilometers outside of Oudtshoorn, on the outskirts of the beautiful little village De Rust. That has been showcased on various social media platforms and print media. They've got Instagram page. We'll get to that a little bit later, where people can find Nimby Valley. And Kath, you 18 years ago, you found what is now called Nimby Valley. And Nimby is all about permaculture and sustainable living. Please take us back to how you found that piece of ground, and what happened. What went through your mind? How did you bump into it?
So I'd like to go back to when I was a young child, and I actually had an incredible passion for nature. And so when I had an opportunity to go to university and study something, I chose to study a BSc agriculture, but with a majoring in grassland science, which is like an ecology degree. And when we finished, I completed my degree. That's where I met Ross, my partner. And although we completed the degree, we didn't always agree with everything in the degree, because it was very profit-driven agriculturally, and it seemed like it wasn't working in harmony with nature. So we explored those ideas further, and we came across someone that could offer us a permaculture course in South Africa. And we did that, and that instilled in us the idea that we wanted to grow food organically. So when we finished doing that course, we found a small farm in Nelspruit, and we grew organic veggies there. And once we were in production, we found a little farm stall just outside of Nelspruit, where we had a table and we sold organic produce. And at that time, hardly anybody knew what organics meant. So we've come quite a far way since then. Everybody now knows what it means to eat organically. So I think we were way before our time. So our farming enterprise then didn't work. And we ended up working in the bush after that, finding work as guides and managers. But it was always a dream of ours to eventually find a farm that we could live sustainably on and live in harmony with nature. And so after working for 20 years or so, we finally managed to save enough money that we could buy our own farm.
Wow.
And originally we wanted to live down in wilderness where it's lush and there are lots, very easy to grow food. But after having lived in these extremely wild areas in Botswana and Tanzania, we struggled to settle in what would be a very small farm. And somebody took us over the mountain. They said if we come over the mountain into the Klein Karoo, we could buy a much bigger piece of land. And so we came over, the guy showed us the farm. That area used to be called Mara Vlakte, so barren valley. And the farmer, the previous history of the land that we bought was of initially cattle farming and then sheep and then goats and then ostriches, and then the guy went bankrupt. So no one had lived there for quite a while, and it was quite a degraded piece of land. But we decided to sleep there for the night. And when we put up our little tent on the Olifants River, and we heard the jackal calling that night and not another sound of a human being, the next day we bought that piece of land.
I'm getting goosebumps. And then you just made, that was your decision.
It was a very hard decision in the beginning. It was quite a harsh piece of land, and there was nothing on it except for 4 walls of an old labourer's house, so no running water. So we had to really start from scratch.
And build what you've built today. And we'll get to that because both you and Ross did almost everything, if not everything, with your own hands.
Yeah, so our previous jobs was managing lodges and quite upmarket lodges. So we had up to 90 staff under us. And I think the change that we were both looking for was an opportunity just to be self-employed and not have to manage other people. So just take a break from that. And that was our main motivating factor to doing it all ourselves. So our skills development was enormous for us. So we learned how to do everything from building to plumbing to growing our own food.
So for our listeners, I just want to say that Nimby Valley is the ideal breakaway if you really just want to disconnect from everything. I visited you last week. It was lovely to be there. And what was, I think, the biggest plus point at Nimby Valley is you have 24-hour electricity.
Exactly. So we don't know what load shedding is.
They don't know what load shedding is. I think before we listen to our first music break, and I'm curious to know why you chose the song, I do remember then when we were in almost like strict lockdown, there was a young couple, Sarah and Josh, that escaped Johannesburg, I think the night before strict lockdown. And then they came. How long did they stay at Nimby?
So as we got given those 3 days to find the place that you were going to spend your first 3 weeks of lockdown in. And so we started to get cancellations for our guest houses. We had a lot of maybe 50% overseas bookings. And obviously they started to cancel. And then we got a phone call from Sarah in Johannesburg saying, can they come and stay for 3 weeks? And we thought, wow, 3 weeks is such a long time. I don't know if we should say yes. But we did. And 5 months later, Sarah and Josh left Nimby Valley. So we had an incredible experience together. And now today they live just the other side of Durust on a farm themselves.
I know, and what a beautiful story, and I think what a beautiful example for marketing Nimby is that I remember Sarah said to me, they're young, very young, and the assumption is that young people need to be in the hustle and bustle. They came down, and Sarah said to me one day that ever since she arrived at Nimby, she's starting to feel more healthier and healthier. And that's what we're going to speak of about after the break. And she didn't want to go back. And I think everything is online these days, Kath. So when you live out here, you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
Though that amazing couple currently have. All right, your first music, your choice was Big Yellow Taxi.
Yes.
Why did you choose this song?
So that song actually, it was topping the charts when I was at university. And I think it had quite a big influence on my life because the lyrics of it go, don't it always seem to be that you don't know what you've got till it's gone?
Yeah.
And she refers to the fact that we take down all the trees and we put up a parking lot and then we ask people $1.50 just to see a tree.
So true.
Yeah, so it's about really treasuring the nature around us and not taking it for granted and working in a way and living in a way that we live in harmony with nature rather than in a destructive way.
Absolutely. We're going to speak about that after the break, but for now, let's listen to Big Yellow Taxi. En ons is terug by Vroue Wat Voorloop, net hier in Oudtshoorn in die pragtige Klein Karoo. Vroue Wat Voorloop word moontlik gemaak deur Maddie's Bridal Nest, geleë in 1 Vredestraat, Volmoed, Oudtshoorn. Kontak vandag vir Madeleine by 072-661-4182 vir die huur van jou droomtrou of aantrok. Maddie's Bridal Nest. And our guest in the studio this morning is Kathryn from Nimby Valley Guest Farm. Kath, we've spoken about the fact that you found that piece of land 18 years ago. You slept in this little tent and you heard the jackal and you made that decision to live your life here, having worked at lodges all over Africa. And when I visited the other day, I was absolutely amazed. It just looks exactly the same as on your Instagram page and on all social media that we've seen of Nimby. But there must have been a lot of work that has gone into building those. Am I right if I say it's a cop house? Mm-hmm. The guest house, you've got 2 guest cottages now, plus you're busy building your house. There was a piece of land. Mm. So when did you lay that first, I wouldn't say brick, take us back.
Okay.
What did you do first?
Okay, so we arrived in November 2004 with just 4 walls. And obviously we had to create a place to live. So that's where we had never built anything before. We didn't really have those skills. But when we lived in Botswana, Ross was involved in installation of solar and plumbing and water supply. So he definitely had some skills. And it was actually before the internet. So it wasn't, you couldn't just go on YouTube and watch a YouTube clip as to how to do things. So we really had to figure it out our own way. So our original house that we lived in the beginning was a cinder brick house, and then we just completed it using cinder brick. And in that process, we came across a woman in McGregor, and that woman in McGregor was building a cob house. So cob is actually an Irish name for a loaf of bread. Mm-hmm. And in the technique, when you're building, you create, instead of creating bricks, you create it's actually a ball of mud that looks like a small round loaf of bread. Mm-hmm. So we did a weekend course with her. And after doing that weekend course, we got back on the farm. And because you're using clay and water basically as cobbing, and the whole of the Klein Karoo is filled with clay soils. So we built a little pizza oven as an experiment to see how this technique worked for us. And we realized that is so easy. So after building the pizza oven, we went ahead and we started to build our own house using the same technique. So what's beautiful with cobbing is that you don't need to buy the materials. Everything is naturally, it's sourced locally. So it's a sustainable building technique. And we use Spanish reeds in our roof, which the Spanish reed actually invades the Olifants River. Mm-hmm. Normally we have flaky srit is the indigenous one. And they're guys around the corner from us that harvest the the Spanish reed. So we use that in our roof. And in Oudtshoorn, there's a second-hand a demolisher shop called Boshoff's. And we sourced all of our windows and doors from him. So we decided to either use sustainably sourced materials or repurpose materials. And it took the 2 of us 9 months to build this house.
Wow. And in the 9 months, where did you stay?
So we were staying in the other cottage, which is now our first guest cottage.
Oh, and that one. But there was a time when somebody said to me, when you stayed in this building that had a half a roof on it.
Yes, there was. So right in the beginning, the cinder brick house, because it didn't have a roof on it. We stayed in the one corner while we fixed the other corner.
Oh, my word. And you never ever, and you were so excited. Yeah. Because you obviously saw what you're working towards.
Yeah, we definitely had a vision and a big dream of being able to create our own space and live sustainably. So we, coming back to the Cobb house, the whole house, and you've seen the house. It's now a guest beautiful. Cottage, and it's very comfortable and actually luxurious.
Very.
But the whole house cost us 30,000 rand to build because you're not really buying in supplies. You're using local materials. Yeah. And if you think most people will work for 20 years before they've paid back their houses.
I know.
So we get trapped in a system. And what we're very, very encouraging of is to share our skills with other people so that they can also be free from the system. So, yeah.
I think that's absolutely amazing, especially in the times we're living now.
Absolutely.
And Kath, so I must say you've got this outside bath.
Yeah.
That to me was absolutely beautiful. Tell our listeners about that outside bath.
Okay, so it's called a fire bath, and basically what it is, it's a second-hand enamel bath, so you can't use anything else. But we just took this enamel bath, and using the cobbing technique of mud, we created a fireplace underneath and then a chimney that takes the smoke away. And what that means is you can tap your bath and you can make a fire underneath the bath. And you then have hot water that stays hot for as long as your fire is going. So we can have 2-hour-long baths.
That's amazing.
Underneath the Karoo stars.
Exactly, and you don't need to pay any electricity bill.
No, and then it's also a bit of a therapy because next to the bath we have an ice-cold shower. So it's a bit like the Swedish that go from a sauna into the ice. We go from the hot fire bath into a cold shower.
That's amazing. Yeah. Kath, so also what I want to find out is, I know that when I visited the other day, it was very interesting to see, your chickens. So share with our listeners what you basically do, with the soil, that share with us about the chickens.
Okay, sure. So when we got to the farm, we did a soil analysis of our soil to find out what we could grow. We had an intention to grow olives for the oil. And when we got the analysis back of the soil from the University of Stellenbosch, they said to us that we have got very saline soil with a very high pH, and that it wouldn't be possible to grow olive trees. So the soil was also completely denuded of any form of carbon or nitrogen. It was basically an empty soil. And we had done our PDC, which is a permaculture development course. And with that, it says to you can take any piece of land, doesn't matter the state that it's in. And if you apply the ethics and the principles, the design principles of permaculture, then you can transform any piece of land from barren to abundant. And so, yeah.
So, sorry, I just want to interrupt you here. What, for our listeners that might not be that informed, because I wasn't until I went to Nimby, what is permaculture?
So, permaculture is a term that was coined by an Australian man called Bill Mollison. And what it is basically taking two words. It's permanent agriculture and putting them together. So, permaculture. And it's a set of ethics and design principles using science and observation. So one of the ethics which really I resonate with a lot is fair share. So we've all been brought up in a capitalist system where it says it's not about fair share, it's actually mostly about me, and I must take as much as I can and accumulate more and more as much as I possibly can. And permaculture changes that around, and it says, what about if we live a life where we don't do that? where we actually just take what we need and then we fairly share the rest. So in the case of what we did at Nimby Valley, it's a 70-hectare farm. We're very blessed with that size. But we've taken only a hectare of that and developed that for ourselves. So we've decided that that's enough to sustain our lifestyle. And the rest, the 69 other hectares, is there for the wildlife. So that's an example of it. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And bring us back to your chickens.
Okay, so coming back to the chickens.
That was so interesting.
One of the design principles of permaculture is to integrate rather than segregate. And that can be quite philosophical. But in the case of the chickens, what we do there is we have designed beds that are all 13 square in diameter. And they're all that same size. And then we've got a chicken cage that is 13 square meters in diameter. And we have 8 hens, so no roosters, but 8 hens that live in that space, and they provide us with eggs. And then those chickens are on the actual beds where we grow our vegetables, and they stay there for 2 weeks. And they scrop, and they take out the cutworms, and they take out the mole crickets, and they fertilize, and they create basically like a living compost heap. And then after 2 weeks of them being on the bed, we pick up the cage and we move them with the cage to the next bed.
One.
And what that means is the chickens are not returning back into the same place where they sleep all the time, and you start to get issues with lice and diseases. But rather than that, our chickens have a fresh piece of soil every 2 weeks. And the first thing they do when they land on this new piece of soil is they have a big dust bath. And they get rid of all the lice and everything on their bodies. They're absolutely in heaven, in the sunshine, in the sand. And then they clean the beds for us. So our chickens are really the gardeners, and we just manage the chickens.
That's amazing. And when I visited, you showed that to me, and then I also saw your vegetables, and I saw your lettuce. So I picked. You said you can pick one. And what I picked up immediately was the texture. And it tasted absolutely divine.
Yeah.
So I couldn't compare it to what I buy in the shops.
No.
It's different. Very, very different.
Yeah.
But Kath, okay, so you plant your own, grow your own vegetables, and how many fruit trees?
So at the moment we've got 60 different fruit trees.
60?
Yeah, 60. And what we did is we actually planted different varieties so that all throughout the year we have fruit available. So we don't have a one time when we have all the fruit ripening. So at the moment we have lemons and oranges and actually still bananas in the Klein Karoo. I've given you some in your basket today.
No, I've got a basket filled with also awesome goodies. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. So we eat, we only eat seasonal fruit and vegetables. So whatever our garden is providing at that time is what we eat. And we work really with our soil fertility, and that's why the food tastes so different. So we work with the microorganisms in the soil and making the soil alive. And what happens when you do that is that the plants that you plant in that soil are alive themselves. And what you tasted the other day is basically a plant that is, its cells are filled with goodness.
With goodness.
And so when you're eating that, it also relates to the microorganisms in your gut. And so when you're eating food that is so rich with nutrients, you actually don't need to eat nearly as much. And it feeds your body. So for 18 years we've been doing that, and in 18 years we wake up every day and we feel extremely well. So we don't have a GP. In 18 years we've never needed one because the food is our medicine.
Once again, bringing back to nature. Nature provides. Nature will always provide. Kath, speaking about health, you, as you've said, you haven't seen a GP in so many years. There must have been a time in your life where you ate the wrong food.
Definitely.
And if you look back now, I mean, most of us want to be, we strive to be healthier. If you look back at that time and you look back and you look at now how you feel, there's obviously the difference. You will never go back to the way that you've when you've eaten the wrong food?
No, I can't. So I'm a bit addicted to feeling well. And actually, I think most people are. So I think when we're young, we can get away with a lot because our bodies can handle the bombardment. But as we start to age, things change for us. And we develop intolerances for food, especially if we've been exposed to a lot of chemicals.
Definitely.
And so what happened to me personally is I became gluten intolerant, which is incredibly common nowadays, much more common than what we admit. So I started to develop gut aches. And then I started to realize how food made me feel. So I started to realize if I eat sugar or food with sugar in it, then I get an energy slump. And I started to realize if I eat bread, then I don't feel so great in my stomach. And because I love to feel good, I started just to make the decision to eat healthier. So I know that vegetables and fruit make me feel fabulous. And that's what I base my diet on. So 80% of what I eat comes from the garden.
Okay, so for anybody that doesn't have the facilities that you have, the sustainable living and a farm like that, if you have to give advice, look, I think I'm lactose intolerant, I'm gluten intolerant. I do feel when I eat the wrong food, I do have problems with my gut, and I think there are so many other women out there.
Yeah.
What advice would you give? What should you start changing?
I think it's quite well known now that any processed food is where a lot of the gut issues come from. So when you walk into a supermarket, the majority of the food that you're seeing there is processed. But you have the choice where you can go for the whole foods. So that means anything that's not broken down. So it may be all your fruit, obviously, and all your vegetables. And then try to avoid your sugars and anything that has any form of preservative in it. So, for example, we've been sold the idea that cereals are good for us. But if you turn the box around and you look at the ingredients, it's normally the third or the second ingredient, which means it's made up of, is usually sugar. And so sugar has quite a negative effect, or a serious negative effect on our gut. And so does wheat, and that's mostly because of the way that it's grown. So it's grown with a lot of herbicides and pesticides. And when we continuously eat wheat, we actually start to affect the microflora in our gut. And that's where the gluten intolerance comes from. So we're killing off most of our microflora. So I would suggest people eat whole foods as much as you can.
And Kath, protein, do you add protein to your diet? Or not diet, to your lifestyle?
Yeah, so we eat eggs, a lot of eggs.
Oh, and I must admit, your eggs are, look, you can taste the difference between a farm egg, those that you sell at the market in the rest, and those that you buy, I don't know, that, when you open it up, those you buy, with all due respect to wherever it comes from, it looks very, I don't know, watery.
Yeah.
But yours is, you can taste the difference.
Yeah, so you are what you eat, and our chickens eat only organic food. They're eating whole foods, so because of that, their eggs are incredible to eat, and they're much more nutritious. So try and find a local farmer. Try and find someone that you know that raises chickens ethically and without hormones. And because the hormones also have such an effect on our health.
Absolutely. And Kath, I wanted to ask you about an example that you also shared about 2 slices of apples.
Okay.
Yeah, the one was bought and the other one was one of your apples that you cut in half and you left them. Share it with us.
Okay, so it was this experiment was actually done by a very good friend of ours, Joel, that lives just outside of Durrest. He's also a permaculturalist. And what he did is he noticed that when he bought apples from supermarkets, that he would cut them in half and they could last for long. They could last for 2 weeks without going brown. And he remembered as a child, you would take a bite out of an apple and it would go brown.
Immediately, yeah.
Which is normal, what it should do. So he did an experiment. He came and fetched an apple from our tree, so an organically grown apple, and he bought one from the shop the same day. And he cut these apples open and he put them on a plate and he left the plate out. And the organic apple immediately started to go brown and it started to attract the ants. And the ants went and ate this organic apple, but they didn't go anywhere near the shop-bought apple. And then he thought, well, maybe it's just because the organic apple tastes a little bit better. So he took the organic apple off the plate and the ants disappeared. So they didn't see that shop-bought apple as food.
Yeah.
They saw it as nothing.
As nothing. There was nothing that attracted them, because obviously if you look at nature, your tiny little gogaitjies, as you would call them, insects go, I mean, they also need to feed.
Yeah.
And that just reminds me of how unhealthy we are living in a way.
So yeah, it's got to do with the whole way that we grow food, the whole way that we interact with our natural environment. We're very afraid of it at the moment, so we sterilize everything. We think it needs to be clean. But in actual fact, our health lies in diversity. So we need to have as much microflora as possible in our gut, for example, to help digest our food.
And if you do, last question before our music break, I just love speaking to you. I think I'm going to go and stay on Nimby for about a month or two, and then I'll come back to radio again and share with our listeners how I feel and look. Kath, yeah, so last question is, diet-wise, lifestyle-wise, what does Kath's day look like? What do you start eating? How much do you eat? When do you eat?
Okay,
I'm curious.
I'm very lucky because I work from home. So to answer that question on when I eat when I'm hungry. I do quite a lot of foraging. So it's almost like imagining you're like a gorilla that will just go and nibble on things. But we eat more of like a European kind of a diet or an Indonesian diet where we'll eat vegetables for breakfast, maybe rice and vegetables, as opposed to like a cereal. We won't do that. We eat lots of eggs. And then lunch and dinner is either a combination of a vegetable soup or a lovely salad from the garden, or vegetable stews or whatever it is. But the main ingredient is always vegetables because they make us feel so good.
Yeah, make you feel good. And you're not hungry.
No.
You don't, sometimes you would eat a meal and then a half an hour, 45 minutes later, you go like, I'm hungry again.
No, but if I am, because we have all these fruit trees, I can just go to the mulberry tree when it's in season and I can eat 100 mulberries if I feel like it, like I did when I was a child.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, yeah.
So, Kath, we're going to have another music break, but yeah, for all our listeners, I can really recommend. It's not always that I do recommend places, but having seen what I saw at Nimby the other day, walking through your 2 guest cottages, and I mean, meeting you and Ross, and knowing what after the break, I'll share with our listeners what's actually available at Nimby. Who does not want to go and have a breakaway 80 kilometers from George Airport, fly down, drive out, meet these awesome people, and maybe stay there for a week or 2 and live that way? Because health is our wealth.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We are going to listen to your next choice, and that is, am I pronouncing it correct? Hasia.
Hasia, yeah.
And why did you choose this song?
Okay, so this is a very special song to me. It's about woman rising, and it talks about women are the river of life, and I believe that we are the nurturers, and we need to nurture our environment, our children, and that if we do that, if we make the connection to nature and to how we are feeling through our food, and through deep care for the environment, that the world will be a more beautiful place. So it's time to change.
It's time to change. Let's listen. En ons is terug hier by Vroue Wat Voorloop na hierdie musiekbreek vir ons luisteraars wat ingeskakel het. Ons gas vandag in die ateljee is Kathryn, Eybers. Sy en haar, she and her partner are the owners of Nimby Valley Guest Farm, which is situated just outside the beautiful village of De Rust. And also I think the big thing with Nimby, which is a guest farm, it's permaculture and sustainable living. It is quite close to the Kango Caves. It's very close to the beautiful Maringspoort waterfall and Maringspoort. And the benefit these days is that you have 24-hour electricity.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in sustainable living, Kath and Ross, when you visit Nimby Valley, are very happy to walk you through their organic gardens, self-built cop houses, and solar systems. And added to that, you enjoy the fresh vegetables and fruit in season from the inspiring permaculture gardens that are few steps away from your cottage. The views are beautiful. There's a hammock, there's a pool, there's an outside warm bath. You can sit in that bath for hours. Kath, I've been wanting to ask you this question. You are such an inspiring person, but I must also say that you're a very humble person. Got a very soft nature in the time that I got to know you. Where did you grow up and who were your inspiration and your mentors in your life?
So you never choose where you're born. But I did grow up in the city. I grew up in Johannesburg. And I think for me, what was my saving grace in those days is my parents loved to take us to the bush. So on most of our holidays, we would go either to the Kruger National Park or Suikerbosrand or Pilansberg. And there I developed a deep connection with nature. So my father was an amateur botanist, and I became interested in plants and also in insects and birds. And I ended up studying, one of the honors that I did was in entomology, which is the study of insects.
Wow.
And yeah, so that sort of put me on that journey, and I was inspired. I guess my mentor at that time was actually nature. So the time that I spent in nature taught me the most.
And what about nature? Because there's something that I want to add there. What about nature till today inspires you?
So I think it's the complexity of it, the diversity of it, that sometimes as human beings we think that we understand it, we think that we know how to control it, but as soon as if you take time out and you take 5 minutes and you spend it at a little flower in the garden and you see the amount of pollinators or predatory wasps that come and visit that flower in that short time, then we start to realize that this system is way more magical than what we can begin to comprehend. So I apply that into the farming that we do today, where we have a hands-off approach. So we allow nature to run its course. We don't use any chemicals or pesticides because I believe that we can't possibly know what is actually going on in the natural system.
And Kath, you know, Nikki from Village Trading Post here in De Rust always have the saying that he says life is beautiful, but he also once said to me that, and someone else in Oudtshoorn said, there's a kind of magic in the little karoo. Do you believe that?
So when I wake up in the morning and I hear, the first thing that I'm aware of is the sound of the birds. And then the second thing that I become aware of as I open up my eyes is I gaze over the Olifants River Valley and I look up at the magical Swartberg Mountains. And I can sink into that peacefulness of the Klein Karoo. And actually today what I think is our biggest luxury is the luxury of open space. A place where we're not inundated or bombarded with other people's ideas or advertising. There's so much advertising in this world. Everyone trying to sell things to us. But I think it's that beauty in nature.
I agree
That's
with
where
you.
the magic lies.
I agree with you 100%. And I also want to say we're moving towards the end of our interview, which is so sad. But to our listeners, if you want to hear more about Kath, where can somebody contact Nimby Valley to have a look at what your place looks like or to book accommodation?
Mm-hmm. So we do have a web page, Nimby Valley. If you search that, it will come up. We listed on Airbnb if you're wanting to look at reviews and pictures. And then we have an Instagram account and a Facebook account. So, yeah.
And it's all Nimby Valley. It's Numbi Valley.
Yeah.
Please do yourselves a favor whilst you're listening to this program is quickly Google. I still got a couple of questions for Kath. But there's one thing, Kath, that I want to add is we also moved to the little Karoo just before lockdown. At a point, I thought, why did we move this way? You know, why did we leave Cape Town, which is also a beautiful city, to come and live here? And the more you stay in one place, and I agree with what you said with nature. I love nature because it teaches you so many lessons. And the longer we have been living here, the more addicted you get to cycling out there in the veld, climbing up the Swartberg Mountains, or just being in those mountains. And I think the biggest benefit out here is the fresh air and the fact that you're safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you relate that to the city, everything is a little bit slower. But the other thing, and that's something that I've learned from Sarah and Josh, that lives here, and I mean they're working for corporates, is that you're online, so they've actually got the best of both. They're close to an airport, they can work online, and they can fly up to Johannesburg if they need to do business.
Yeah.
So we're so fortunate to be out here in this beautiful area.
Don't tell too many people.
No. So to our listeners, just delete what I've just said. Don't listen to that. Kath, I always love to ask this question. We're moving towards the end. What is the most important life lesson that you've learned to date? Apart maybe from, maybe including nature, what's the biggest life lesson or piece of advice that you can give to people this morning? Something that you've learned in your lifetime.
It's a big question. I think the ethic that I live by most of the time today is to live simply, to simplify my life so that it's filled with peace. And if I live simply, then it allows other people to simply live. So it's about fair share for me. It's about community and about respect to nature. So understanding what my impact is on the natural system in the choices that I make from day to day.
Wonderful lesson. And you're also a yoga instructor. And you give massages.
I do.
And I'm still going to book myself for a massage
you must come.
at Nimby. And I also want to book myself for maybe 2 days, just break away from everything out there because it's so peaceful and quiet.
Yeah, so people can visit us either. We offer workshops. So I offer workshops on food growing. You can come and do a permaculture farm tour. And Ross offers workshops on building with cob. And if you're not doing just a day visit, then you can come and stay, and then we share all that knowledge very freely. So if you come and stay for a week, we can do massage, we can do yoga, we can eat well, you can do a fire bath, you can walk in the mountains, you can cycle, you can spend time in the magical village of Durist. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. What a wonderful offer. Kath and Ross, in his absence, we want to wish you and Nimby Valley only the best, loads of success. Thank you for people like yourselves who are out there to teach us, in a way, what is the right way to live. I think we all want to live for a very long time, and that people don't really respect and take care of their own bodies and their health, and obviously nature around us. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for your time and coming through to the studio.
Thank you,
And
Suezette.
once again, please, if you are in this little Karoo area, in die klein Karoo, kom bly gerus by Nimby Valley Guest Farm. Ek beloof vir julle sal nie spyt wees nie. Kath, baie dankie en ons groet jou. May you have an absolutely wonderful weekend and send our regards to Ross.
Dankie, Suezette.
En sy praat Afrikaans. So sê gou vir ons luisteraars in jou mooi Afrikaans, hulle met lekker naweek hou.
Julle met baie lekker naweek hou.
Daar's hy, Afrikaans is fantasties. Kath, your last choice, can you just give us the name?
Yes, it's Darfur. It's by a group called Metafix. And for me, this is the song of hope. So it's a song about the war in mid-Africa, Central Africa. And he speaks to the people there and that we must always, whatever situation we're in, we can rise out of that.
There you go. What a lot of inspiration between permaculture and sustainable living and nature and insects and eating healthy and looking after yourself. Kath, thank you very much.
Thank you, Suezette.
Be blessed.
Dankie.
En aan ons luisteraars, môreoggend gaan julle lekker yskoue binne in daai yskoue swembad spring. Veral as jy in Johannesburg is en is lekker koud, doen dit net en laat weet vir ons hoe voel julle. Lekker naweek, groete van ons hier by Radio Klein Karoo.